listening to the Talkative Toastmaster podcast. I'm your host, Melanie Surplus. In this podcast, we explore how Toastmasters can help you to polish your public speaking skills, communicate with confidence, and amplify your authenticity. You'll hear from my fellow Toastmasters and I how this global organisation has impacted our lives for the better and how it could impact yours. Now, let's get talkative. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Talkative Toastmaster podcast. This week, it's my absolute privilege to have Jim Kokocki on the show. Jim is a writer, speaker, and speech coach based in Canada. He's been a Toastmaster for 37 years, and in 2015-16, he served as the International President for Toastmasters International. So he's really had that 40,000-foot view of the organisation. In 2020, Jim published Secrets to Becoming an Effective Public Speaker, and in 2021, Jim's second book, Winter Road Hockey, was published. Jim, it's wonderful to have you on the show. Welcome.
Melanie, it's a pleasure to be here.
You've got a lot of experience with Toastmasters, and I can't wait to dive into that. But can you perhaps start by telling us, when did you join Toastmasters and what drove that decision?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career working as a computer programmer, a COBOL programmer, was very strong at those skills, couldn't talk to people, wouldn't talk to people. And one day, two engineers came to my desk and they said, Jim, if your career is going to go anywhere, you need to work on your presentation skills, your speaking skills. And they brought me to Toastmasters. I remember I signed up immediately the first night. I liked what I saw, but for the first 3 or 4 meetings, I didn't say a word. I couldn't break out of that shell. So that's what drove me there. It was Arnold and Bill who forcefully encouraged me to come to the meeting. And we would go to our meetings, which start 6 p.m. on Monday nights and still do. Back in the day, Arnold and Bill would bring me to the hotel bar where we met, and we'd have a beer and chat with my 2 mentors. And I learned so much from those 2 gentlemen. Forever indebted.
Oh, excellent. Are you still in the same club that you joined, or have you moved around?
I am. I have moved around a little bit. So currently I'm sort of on the roster for 4 clubs, but I go to 2 meetings a week. One's Monday night and one's very early Tuesday morning, 7:15 to 8:30 a.m. to satisfy those people in the business world who want to get their self-development done. Check it off their list before 9 a.m.
Yeah, wow. What have you enjoyed most about being a member?
I love the clubs. This Dr. Smedley, when he started this organization back in 1905 and incorporated in 1924, he started clubs. Clubs are magical. So I love seeing members come in and develop like I developed. I just get to charge out of seeing that whenever that takes place. So I love that aspect. And I also recognize after all these years that public speaking is a skill. And you want to be good at anything, you better be practicing your skill, whether it's basketball or cricket or golf or knitting or whatever it happens to be. You need to practice your skill. So I love particularly doing speeches when there's a gap and a club needs a speech and I can fill in last minute. That really tests my ability to define my purpose, generate some material, and get up there and look like I've been working for weeks on it. That's a wonderful skill to have, and I love practicing that.
Yeah, it's the opportunity to do those, not only the impromptu sessions like table topics, but actually, as you say, pulling a speech together is a great place to practice, because often in the workplace we are asked to create a presentation or to do something at last minute and ad hoc. And yeah, to be able to do that and have a safe place to practice that and not necessarily in the workplace is not an opportunity we often get. So yeah, I like that aspect of the clubs.
Let me say further on that of course we'd encourage anybody to spend some time crafting their speeches and practicing their speeches. But it is so true, as you say, Melanie, in the workplace. I've been in situations where I'd heard, here, look, I need you in that boardroom in 10 minutes time. That's the workplace. So folks, if you're in Toastmasters, find opportunities to speak about something you're knowledgeable about. Perhaps it's your club executive officer role. Learn to prepare those speeches and do a good job on them. Make people think you've been spending weeks on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And at what point did you start to do professional speaking?
It's just a natural progression. I got some invitations. I guess when I think about the first one that landed in my lap, somebody who knew me through Toastmasters asked me to speak to his professional group, and then the negotiation started. I said, "Well, what's the offer?" And he said, "Well, what do you ask?" And that's always awkward. And I presented my number, and he met the number.
Mm.
Uh, so it was just a natural progression from Toastmasters. But nowadays, when you're speaking professionally, you're generally solving somebody's problem. So the most recent one I did, someone called and said, "Look, can you help us talk about conflict?" And it's interesting. So it's conflict from a customer client relationship. So I had to think about that. I speak a little bit about conflict, but how do I relate that to their environment? So that's always fun. So it's evolved naturally because of the experience in Toastmasters.
Mm. Okay. And now that you're doing that professionally, how do you find, the 5 to 7 minute speeches when you're back in a Toastmasters club? Because I'm guessing as a speaker, you get more than 5 to 7 minutes.
I find 5 to 7 minutes very stressful now. So it's seriously stressful. So usually in my clubs, I'll ask for 8 to 10 minutes. And I don't know how it's happened, but I've sort of gravitated towards 8 to 10 minute segments. So sometimes I am required to do 5 to 7 minutes, and it seriously does stress me. So yeah, I'll usually ask for 8 to 10 minute segments, and then those are building blocks for longer speeches generally. So that's my approach.
As we were talking about with contests and things, like even the fact that you can be disqualified for speaking over time. So I guess that the timing part of Toastmasters and the discipline of that is also great practice, again, for those real world situations where you do have to sometimes only, speak for a very short time,
It's true, and you need to adjust. But I will say, if I ask for 8 to 10, I'm pretty well in that window of 8 to 10 minutes. It is important to know how much content you got, ask for it, and if given, to make sure you meet your expectations and not exceed them. But you need to be diligent in how much time you need and consume.
And in terms of your leadership journey in the organization, obviously being the international president at one point, how long did it take you to get to that, or what was sort of the path that eventually led you to that top role?
Hmm. Yeah, well, the path, of course, is defined in our documentation about how to serve, how to run, et cetera. And I will say, I'm usually reluctant to take on positions. I'm pretty selfish with my time. I'm generous in many ways, but I need to determine, like, does an organization need me? Have I got something to offer? Will I benefit in some way? And very rarely is it monetarily. In Toastmasters, it's never monetarily. So I was very slow to progress through all the positions, the district positions that you're in now, the district positions that you may someday assume, and then to run for the board. It wasn't a quick stepping stone for me any step along the way. I'd helped somebody get elected as second VP, which led to international president, Mr. John Lau, and that kind of got me interested in the process, and so then I decided to run for those positions.
In being in that position, what were some of the observations or perhaps, takeaways from that role?
One is I just I love and respect our clubs, and especially the clubs that are at the low membership levels, and then the club leaders are working so hard to promote and attract new members and keep their club viable. I really think we should be doing much more to support them. Got to find ways. I'll leave it to the board and district teams to figure out what's the best way to support those clubs. But clubs are the essence of this organization. Members join clubs, and then they become members of Toastmasters International. And virtually every member I've ever met, whatever club they join, they think this is the best club in the world.
Yes.
Whether it's got 8 members or 12 or 40. So I just respect our clubs, and I learned that ever more so with my travels and interactions as international president. I respect our club leaders. I just treasure the work they do.
Yeah, for a volunteer organisation, there's a lot of people putting in a lot of effort a lot of time on, whether it's weekends in contest season or just the admin that goes on to run clubs. And I don't think until you've done the various parts of that, and I'm sure there's even more work behind the scenes, the more broad the roles get. But yeah, I just think when you just rock up to a meeting, as a new Toastmaster, you really have no idea of the depth behind the organization and the work that goes into making each meeting a success.
It is true, but I'm always cautious as the volunteers and attracting volunteers. We need to make sure that these don't become full-time jobs. We can make it a full-time job. We can make anything a full-time job.
Yes.
But these positions in Toastmasters, this is a volunteer organization. We need to help people manage their time and understand what's really critical that needs to be done, and help them and support them to get that done in various ways. But it can't be a full-time job. Can't be.
Yes. Well, unless, one of my clubs is an advanced club and we talk about tragics all the time, and we definitely identify as Toastmasters tragics. And it is interesting. I think the organization brings out the best in people in terms of the people who are willing to share their knowledge and experience and time. And again, being around those kind of people, that's our tribe. That's they're great people to hang around.
Definitely.
I think. Yeah.
Agreed.
You did your year as international president, and then where do you sort of go from there? I mean, obviously you're still in the organization, but yeah, how do you sort of make that transition from being there and then like, okay, next year I'm just gonna chill, how does that work for you?
Well, when you finish as international president, you're still on the board, on the executive committee. It's an immediate task, so you've got responsibilities there. And even once you leave the board for a couple of years minimum, you've got some assignments, chairing the International Leadership Committee and working with the International Leadership Committee. And even after that, you're often asked to serve on committees to help Toastmasters figure out options and strategies. So all that happened. But for me, there's a message I'd like to give to any folks. Like, treasure the skills you develop in Toastmasters. Really test them outside of Toastmasters. So it was, I suppose, as I was leaving the board as immediate past international president, a friend of mine, a former Toastmaster, was chairing a board for a group called L'Arche St. John. L'Arche is another international organization that works with people with intellectual disabilities in about 40 countries around the world. So he'd asked me to get involved with that board. So I did. He wanted help with public relations and marketing, and I helped him with that. And it wasn't too long, a couple of years later, when they tapped me and said, "We'd like you to serve as board chair and president of L'Arche." So that provided a new opportunity to test the skills and to make a meaningful contribution to an amazing organization that does a phenomenal work for a group that needs supports to live their lives to their full extent.
And in terms of those leadership skills, would you say, because I understand you've had a history in sales and marketing in large organizations, how do you find leadership in a volunteer organization versus, say, leadership in a corporate environment? Are there distinct differences? Is that when you talk about testing those skills, is it testing your ability to run volunteer organizations?
Yeah, and for me, I was an employee in large organizations. So that's an environment where with quarterly pressures, annual targets set, important performance reviews, ability to hire and sometimes take disciplinary action with employees and sometimes let them go. My role in volunteer organizations has been on boards. So that's more about setting strategy with the staff, setting strategy, setting expectations, measuring those expectations. A board's generally, it's only going to have the hire and fire power for one employee, the top employee. So it's different being an employee in a large organization and serving on a board in a volunteer organization. And I suppose I've never had the experience of serving as an employee in a volunteer organization. So I would think that's similar to being an employee in a for-profit organization.
Yeah. And what would you say were some of the other skills, that you have been able to use elsewhere?
Boy, there is just so many and so many available to anybody who commits any level of work to Toastmasters, but simply running meetings,
Yes.
being able to start on time, end on time, little basic parliamentary procedure like dealing with one issue at a time and not getting distracted, learning to let the minority speak, but the majority decide. We become very skilled at that and being effective communicators. So many organizations need those very basic skills. And I think a lot of our members just take that for granted, but you've likely got those skills or the opportunity to develop them to a very high extent. And I really encourage anybody in Toastmasters to treasure the experience. I remain a member, but I like using those skills, testing those skills, benefiting other organizations by deploying those skills. So find new opportunities to exercise those outside of Toastmasters. And I think that will just increase your commitment to being a member of Toastmasters.
Because again, you can practice those skills and refine them and then unleash them on the world. I think that's great. And so how did you get into writing? What drove the decision to get into writing and writing about speaking? And
it really supported some of the paid work that I was getting. It's like, look, if someone's going to pay me some money to speak about public speaking and being an effective communicator, I might as well write down some of those thoughts. It's a supplementary approach to generate some further income. So I wrote the first book about how to be an effective, secrets to becoming an effective public speaker. And then I was hungry to do some more. And actually, I'd done a speech, one of my clubs, about how I sort of accidentally visited all the Major League Baseball teams in North America and saw a game. And Toastmasters helped with that because I would go to a conference in Miami and I'd have a spare night and I'd go to a ball game. Or so I ended up seeing ball games in all those stadiums. So I gave a speech about that, just thinking it was fun. It was just purpose was to entertain. And I watched some of the reactions and some eyes got really big, like, oh, that's super cool. So I decided to write about that, but I found I wasn't very good at keeping records or photos, so I was discouraged. So, but that encouraged the next book. I said, well, it might be fun to just jump in the car in the winter and drive and visit all the minor league hockey teams in these few provinces. So that was the second book.
And you seem to do a lot of writing. I was looking at your blog, and you've been blogging for a long time. You obviously like creating content and getting messages across, whether it's speaking or writing. So how much time do you spend writing these days?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure I've got a good measure of that. I generally try to put out a couple of blog posts a month. And what drives that generally is I listen to what people are asking me for advice upon. So I wrote one recently where someone asked a question. He said, how do you manage a team that's more professional than you? And that really struck me as odd. And but anyway, they're writing upon that. So I've got a list of things I can write on. That I continue to fill that list of potential topics, but I listened for what people are asking or talking about or what advice I might give to a speaker. I'm writing one now because of an evaluation I delivered recently where someone wrote a very good speech, but it was an essay and there wasn't much eye contact. So I'm writing about how, look, like an essay is a wonderful form of communication. A speech is a wonderful form of communication. They are different. There are similarities, but it's important for particularly new speakers to understand that it's not so much in an essay. You write precise words. You can be very clear, but a speech is an interaction with an audience. So very different preparation.
Absolutely. And do you think writing helps you to improve your speaking skills? Yeah, just that always content creating, that exercising that muscle, I guess.
Absolutely agree. Writing exercises the muscle. It causes you to think clearly, to define your purpose. And I've done some workshops with some very good speakers. And so my approach when doing those sorts of workshops, helping people build speeches, is to get a general theme, generate all the possible speaking points, and then ask the question, well, what's your purpose when you're speaking to the audience? Sometimes that leaves people flat-footed. It's like, well, I didn't really think about that. I was just going to deliver a speech. But writing in particular, or speaking, you should always define your purpose, which helps you select the content that you include or discard. Hard to discard content, but it's important if you're going to serve your purpose.
What do they say? Kill your darlings. It's hard, especially when you have to carve out bits of a speech and it's only 5 to 7 minutes and you're sort of working out how to whittle it down. But it's good practice. Again, you get lots of practice doing that. Do you continue to take on leadership roles in your clubs now, or do you just head along as a member, or what's Toastmasters look like for you now?
Yeah, I will take on leadership positions in clubs, but I prefer other people do that. It's an opportunity for growth and development. So I prefer not to. I have filled in recent years. Happy to do so. I guess I'm kind of a reluctant advisor these days. If I see things going on that I don't think are working particularly well, I will quietly reach out to the senior leaders in the club and say so. And it's more the approach these days. But I'm happy to take on those positions. But really, I'd rather somebody new to take them on. And it's an interesting position being a senior 37-year veteran of the organization. People can't help but look to me from time to time, and I'm happy to offer advice. But my gosh, I want to see people choose a new path to find their way.
Yeah. And what's your take on the move to, it sort of, I guess, really started in COVID and the hybrid, and now there are a lot of online clubs, and you would have seen that really evolve in the time you've been in Toastmasters, and the technology and all the platforms now that are available. What's your views on the online or the hybrid club experience?
I think it's fantastic. Business has been doing hybrid meetings for a long time and virtual meetings for a long time. I'm rather proud. It was I was on the board on executive committee when we finally relented and allowed online meetings. There was a lot of feeling in the organization for some time that we had to meet face to face, which I still prefer.
Yeah.
But the reality is these days that it saved our bacon during COVID, obviously, and the technical skills that many of our members had developed enable us to quickly move online. Clubs quickly moved online. It was fantastic. Once again, showing the leadership and the passion members and club leaders have got for the clubs. So I'm pleased where it's taken us, and it is fascinating. And one of my clubs, we've got a member who joins us from Zimbabwe in Africa, a gentleman who joined us from the other side of Canada, big country. It's wonderful what it's enabled for us.
And I think as well, just as you say, the fact that you can have members joining from other countries, and there are whole online clubs based on people from all around the world. In fact, it was Eliza from the World Travellers Toastmasters Club who put us in contact, and I'd seen her running that 20-hour speech fest, and it's so awesome to see the creativity that different Toastmasters come up with and how they can mobilize people from all around the world. I think it's amazing, and the opportunities that brings and the people that it brings together is so very cool.
It is very cool, and I'm very proud of what Eliza did with that project. And she really developed the talents of the people who ran those 1 hour sessions or 2 hour sessions, I think they were. But just an amazing opportunity that emerged because we are operating in a virtual world.
Yeah, I was dialing in and out of that through the day because it was mostly through the day in my time zone. And she was there every time I logged on. She was there. She was like, I'm like, wow, but just the logistics and getting all those speakers together was, I mean, I think as well, the nature of the projects that Pathways has opened up and all these extra elective projects and the high performance leadership projects, I think seeing the creativity that people can bring to those projects. And the sky's the limit. There's no real limit on what you can do with these projects. So it's inspiring to see where people take them.
It absolutely is, it's fascinating to me because we've been around 100 years and we've always changed people's lives. The educational programs have always provided those opportunities. But it does seem to me that with Pathways, people are coming to some major realizations much more quickly. And I don't know what the magic is. I know we've had some wonderful feedback on the design of Pathways, but I've in some of my speeches, I've got 5 examples of people who came to major realizations by just doing a speech. But it forced them to think about their circumstances or get feedback that was particularly valuable. I'll mention one of them.
Yeah.
So one of them, it happened in my club, and one of our members, he was working in sales. He was a manager, and he said, "Well, I'm working on effective coaching." His speech, then he started with that, and he said, "So I had my project said I need to talk to somebody I coach outside of Toastmasters." So he said, "Well, no big deal. I'm a sales manager." So he sat down with one of his salespeople and said, he's full of confidence, "How am I doing as a coach?" And he got a blank stare and a wrinkled eyebrow. And his employee said, "Well, I'm often not sure what to expect from you week to week, month to month." So I'm just delighted that we caused that conversation to happen and for us to help him find that realization before a boss came along and said, "Hey, not working out, is it? See you later."
Yeah.
So I've got other examples too. I won't go into them, but people who've come to some major realizations just by doing the project in Pathways. Can't predict when that'll happen, but anybody who does a lot of Pathways projects, I think, will come to some major realizations.
And at the very least, developing new skills. I mean, when I started this podcast as a result of a level 4 elective project, I had been procrastinating about starting a podcast for a good 10 years, maybe more. And it wasn't that I didn't know how to do it. I'd researched that. But when I saw it was a Pathways project and I could, tick that off and it would count for something, that became motivation for me. And I'm like, why didn't I do this earlier? But yeah, so I've had one of those realizations myself, and it's like, it was almost like I needed the permission or to count for something. Anyway, so yeah.
Interesting lesson in motivation.
Yeah, it is. And I just think there's so many interesting, as a marketer as well, I'm a marketer in my day job. And I think there are so many things in the new Pathways electives, like the social media parts and the blog electives and the podcasting. So that all is very appealing to me because I can find real world examples of how I can, do some of those projects and get experience in things that then help me in my day job. It's
nice.
Yeah. And I just think that's available for everyone. And I always sort of say to people that, they might want experience in developing social media platforms and the like. I mean, everyone can become an influencer with the skills you can get in Toastmasters, and so much opportunity for young people or anyone really. I know a lot of people say they wish they'd started Toastmasters earlier.
Anybody who joins says that.
Yeah. Well, I joined early. I just wish I'd been consistent. So I joined with my mother straight out of high school and out of university, and which was a long time ago. And I wish I'd have really stayed because I'd have probably had, 30 years experience now, but life happens. But yeah, it's impressive that you have done 37 years consistently. That's a milestone. And so what would you say to people who are thinking about Toastmasters and nervous about going into their first meeting? What would you say to them?
Well, a couple of things. First, go to www.toastmasters.org. At the top, you'll see Find a Club. Find a club that is in your community, or perhaps an online club. I think I've still got a bias for new people joining physical clubs. That's when public speaking feels most nerve-wracking for most of us. So find a club, contact them, find out when they meet, and make that introduction. Make sure you're you're going to be welcomed as a guest. And I say that because some clubs are in corporations; they're only for employees. But once you make that contact, just go visit. No commitment. Just say, "Hey, I want to check it out." And I think you'll be amazed at the fun people have when they're taking this risk of standing before a group and speaking. You have a lot of fun, and I think you'll like what you'll see. If you choose not to join, well, that's fine. But you're going to be impressed with the structure and the development of people. And I'd also encourage you, if you're feeling nervous, bring a friend. Just tell them, look, I want to check this out, and I'd like some support. So bring a friend. And, sometimes the friend joins, and the initial initiator does not.
Oh, I haven't seen that one yet, but I can see how that would happen. But I do like the idea of going with a friend, definitely. Yeah, I know when I first went with my mum, it was just something we did together, and we did it for about 5 years, and it was just really good to bounce off just what we were learning and what we were practicing. And she still evaluates episodes of the podcast every now and then. So
I'll look forward to her feedback. And in talking about the going to guests, like, I don't want to minimize the risk that some people feel, and lots of people feel, about crossing through that doorway, ringing the doorbell, or going to that first meeting, and maybe having to speak before the group. That's a huge risk for people. But really encourage you, if we've got a supportive environment, supportive people who've been through that same sort of stress often. So please visit a club.
Yeah,
Tell people about it.
Definitely. Do you set goals for yourself as a Toastmaster each year? And if so, what are your goals for 2025?
I generally don't. And so when it comes to earning designations, I usually earn one or two for one of the clubs that I'm engaged with. I'll complete a couple of levels. So I've reached the DTM level in Toastmasters, and happy about that. Done that twice. Second time, I just kind of fell into it. First time, I worked really hard to get there. Second time, I came to realization, I'm pretty well there again. So for me, the goals are more about what sort of impact I want to have. So what do I want to speak about to the club? And usually for me, that's got relevance to what I'm writing about, or an external speech that I'm delivering, because it usually comes down to communication and leadership in some fashion. Those are just evergreen topics. So I think more about impact topics. That's the way I think about the projects that I'm working on. So not the traditional goal setting of saying, I want to learn my level 5 in a particular program. There's value in that, and I certainly benefited from that early in my Toastmasters career. That's not as important to me any longer. But it is important that the clubs that I'm engaged with, that we work to become distinguished clubs, and if that means I need to complete a level 1 of something, I'm going to get that done.
Yeah, I like seeing the ticks. I like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Actually, that's one of the key lessons for leaders in our clubs. It's any team has got goals. If a team doesn't have goals, then what are they doing? Any team's got goals. So your goal as the club leaders to become a distinguished club, and there's extreme value in accepting that, working to achieve it, communicating that to the other members. And when you do communicate that, I've often been surprised by how some of the members react and respond and say, if that's what we're working towards, if we're trying to get 4 new members, then I'm going to be a guest next week.
Yes.
I've actually heard members say, I didn't know we wanted new members. It's like, that's interesting. But if they don't know, they don't know.
It is. And I think some people their eyes will glaze over when you start talking about points, and the DCP program. But I guess when you explain it in terms of, we do need new members to keep people coming through, to expose more people to the organization, to help more people get the same benefits that you might be getting. I think it's just repositioning some of that, and it's not just points. It's an indication of the quality of a club, and that's what people are paying for. That's the value they're getting from the organization. So I try and position it in that way. It's a measure of the value that we're providing members, which is, as you say, that's the whole point.
Yeah, and any organization's got goals. Any organization needs to do sales and marketing. You need to communicate you exist, what your benefit proposition is. You need to invite people to come to your location and turn some of them into customers or members in our case. Any organization got goals, and leaders will work to achieve goals. The goal of club leaders is to become a distinguished club, and we should share that with their members. Nothing to be ashamed of there. And if people's eyes are glazing over, then we need to think about how we're communicating the purpose of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So in your travels, do you make a point of going to Toastmasters clubs when you're traveling and roaming around the world?
Not generally. Sometimes I'll reach out to a Toastmaster I know to let them know I'm going to be somewhere. But the purpose of travel is to travel and expand your horizons and understand different parts of the world, different cultures. So I would say generally not. It's always a treat if I can, but generally no. I don't search out a Toastmaster club when I travel. Generally.
Okay, fair enough. And what about annual conferences or the annual convention? And is that part of your annual lineup? Do you tend to go to the annual conventions? And
I was to the last two, the one in the Bahamas and the one in Anaheim. I'm planning to be the one in Philadelphia this coming August. So yes, I do plan to be there for some period of time. I was left on Saturday morning from Anaheim, but yeah, it's important to me to connect with my friends and new friends and members who've got a commitment to this organization.
Yeah, it's still on my list of things to do. I haven't been to an international convention yet, but one day I'll get there. But
good.
I love the ability to be able to connect, as you say, whether it's online or in person with organizations. And when you're a Toastmaster of, you can literally walk into any club if you wish, more or less. That aren't restricted.
As long as they're not for employees.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we have quite a few of those corporate clubs in one of our divisions, actually. So it's interesting to hear, some of the challenges they have in terms of trying to expand, or do they let in other people? And it's just different clubs with different issues.
Yeah, and I think generally we don't do a good job of nurturing the businesses that we're resident in, the corporations that we're. So I usually would advocate to corporate clubs. I suggest, look, you're in a corporate environment. They're used to reporting. Send a quarterly report. List your members. List what levels they've worked through, list what pathways projects they're working on. That's PR, and that's nurturing the relationship of the people who generally pay the bills. Because I know I've encountered this in organizations where someone has noticed, a business leader will notice, what happened to Melanie? Where all this confidence come from? What happened with her? And when they found out she went to Toastmasters, it's like, oh, well, let's get Melanie to bring these other three people to Toastmasters. So I think there's a lot more opportunity to communicate within corporations where we've got corporate clubs about who's participating and what they're doing. And it'll solve the puzzle for some of those managers who say, something's changed with that person. I don't know what it is, but it's great.
Yes. Well, and it's so much of a cheaper personal and professional development option as well, considering what some companies will pay to send people on courses and get professionals in. And I think all of that has a place. But in terms of the outlay for one person, for an organization to fund that, it's such a
cost effective.
It's very cost effective. I think it is an opportunity for improvement for the organization as well, just some of those corporate clubs, I think. How do we better support them, especially if you're an area director or a division, director and you have a number of those clubs? I don't, not in my area this time around, but I've seen some of them and just, I guess, a part of the organization that could do with some work. And so, Jim, is there anything else that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Well, I'll only say to all our members, thanks for being a member. You're part of an amazing organization. It's changed people's lives for 100 years. I hope you're getting all you can out of Toastmasters. One of our past presidents said some years ago that if you get everything out of Toastmasters that you can get out of Toastmasters, you will never get out of Toastmasters. And I believe that. There's ample opportunity. And sometimes we need to find opportunities outside Toastmasters, supplemental opportunities to help us realize how valuable the skills that we practice on a regular basis are. So find opportunities to test your skills and deliver value for external organizations, and you'll be even more effective as a Toastmaster.
Awesome. Well, it's great advice from someone who has been doing Toastmasters and being a Toastmaster for many years. So, look, Jim, thank you. I really appreciate your time and the information you've shared with us today. And look, I wish you all the best for the coming year, whatever you do in Toastmasters.
Okay, thanks, Melanie.
If you're ready to unlock your potential, consider joining a Toastmasters club near you. Check out the Find a Club link on the Toastmasters International website at www.toastmasters.org. It's worth visiting a couple of different clubs as a guest to see which club best suits you. If you do take the leap and visit a meeting, I would absolutely love to hear your experience. Feel free to message me at talkativetoastmaster@gmail.com or tag me in the comments if you found this podcast on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Thanks for listening to today's show. Head to talkativetoastmaster.com where you'll find the show notes for this and all other episodes, as well as links to some awesome Toastmasters resources. If you found value in today's content, I'd really appreciate if you could share it with friends and colleagues who may be interested, or leave a review on iTunes. This helps more people to find us. Until next time, remember the words of Seth Godin. If it scares you, it may be a good thing to try. Have a great week.